to eliminate, what we want to stop at Intisar Foundation. And we want to stop it by using drama therapy. Why drama therapy? It's creative, it's fun, it's engaging, it's in a way acting, but it also is very therapeutic, it's very cathartic. And we have huge numbers. I can share the numbers and the successes we've had. We are data-driven, we're impact-driven. We always do research in each and every program we do or we have. So we have the women who've gone through our programs have 93% reduction in depression, 75% reduction in anxiety, 68% reduction in PTSD, 75% increased positive emotional experiences. With these huge numbers, it is obvious that when women are given support, they transform not only their families, not only their house, not only their community, but logically the whole of the region. Because for every woman we work with, she directly affects 6. And then, you know, the 6 affect others. So it is a grassroots movement, a bottoms up, but it also has a wave that can reach very far and change societies. And so I will not give you any more numbers. If you want numbers, by all means, I can share them with you. What I would like to end my contribution with is my call for action. And my call for action basically is to have, if I find it, yeah, I know where it is. I wrote it just now. So my call for action is to destigmatize mental health. And to destigmatize mental health and mental support, we have to think of it in a new and creative way. We cannot change societies, we cannot change cultures, we cannot change the way people think, but we can support them in developing a new way of thinking. Because if we continue this way, all research all around the world has proven that the cycle of violence perpetuates. Victims become victimizers. Hurt people hurt. They're sayings, but they're also documented as evidence. So we have to find therapy, not therapies, we have to find ways of supporting the mental health of women and therefore children and the household. But it has to be engaging. It has to be non-stigmatizing. It has to be group-led, not individual-led. The reason I say group-led is because observing the women that we work with, when it's a group, they realize they all share the same problems and the same happiness. So it creates for these women a bigger picture in that they're all the same. And so they accept each other and therefore accept themselves. And also what it does, it gives them the other point of view and it grows their ability to have a dialogue. And if it grows their ability to have a dialogue, it'll grow their acceptance of a dialogue coming from their children, coming from their husbands, coming from their family, coming from anywhere. So my call for action is to have different kinds of therapies, firstly in emergency, but also in all countries wherever there is friction or wherever there is a need to support women or children. They can't do it alone. We've seen from our women, they can't do it alone. We've seen that our women, once they go through the program, they become financially independent or more financially independent. They become more courageous, they become kinder, they become stronger. And this, I will end my call for action by, seriously, we have to take this as an immediate action that needs to be done. We cannot postpone it. we cannot go on and continue thinking, oh, they'll find a way. Yes, they'll fight a way, but they will not find a way. So thank you so much for that. And I will leave it again to Dr. Anoud.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Intisar. You've certainly given us a lot of food for thought, and especially with your clear ideas on how to empower women related to mental health and to creating chain reaction, circles of self-empowerment. I'm going to move on to Her Excellency Alina Romanowski, the US Ambassador to Kuwait, and who is a career member of the Senior Executive Service. Prior to her appointment, she served as the Department of State's Principal Deputy Coordinator for Counterterrorism, where she oversaw the coordination and integration of US counterterrorism policy objectives and developed and implemented US counterterrorism assistance and capacity building programs with key US partners. During almost 40 years of service across various US government agencies, she has become expert on Middle East affairs. She also held positions in the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs and served in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. She joined the State Department in 2003 to establish the Middle East Partnership Initiative and served as its first director. At the US Agency for International Development, she served at the Middle East Bureau. She also served at the Defense Department, including in senior positions. She was the founding director of the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. We are very grateful to have you with us and to have your expertise on answering this issue of self-empowerment for women in the Arab world.
Well, thank you, Dr. Al-Anoud, for that nice introduction, and also for the opportunity to participate in this, important and I think very timely conversation, not just because tomorrow is International Women's Day, but because this is a really important topic, I think, for everyone. And I'm very pleased that I can be part of this conversation. I also want to thank very much Sheikh Intisar for this invitation and for really the impressive work that you and the Intisar Foundation have done around the world in support of women traumatized by war and violence. You have raised the issue. You've talked a lot about an approach to take on that, and I think your statistics already are showing that that your approach is really working. So I applaud the work you've done, and I want to just support that as we move forward. I thought what I would do today is just sort of talk about the broader issue of the United States support for women's empowerment across the board. And also talk specifically about what we're doing here in Kuwait. So let me start by saying, first of all, that although countries, I think, around the world are making progress towards gender equality and advancing women's rights, I mean, I've been involved in that in almost every part of my career. But I don't think anyone in this panel tonight would disagree with me when I say that there's still a lot more work to be done. And I'm really pleased that I see so many, first of all, participants who've joined, but also others who have joined to take a speaking role. And especially our two gentlemen here. It's very important that gentlemen take a role in this. So thank you for joining us and speaking your points of view. We can't do it except as an entire community, and it's good to see you. So I'm going to do a big plug for you two gentlemen. So thanks. But I also today really want to underscore the U.S. commitment to the advancement of women and girls throughout the world. The empowerment of women and girls is really a central facet of U.S. foreign policy. So I want to specifically talk about how much the State Department has invested in empowering women around the world, including in Kuwait, as I said. So we start with a series of a model of where we look at exchange programs that bring women leaders together to exchange ideas and learn from each other. There's no better way than to walk through that experience together and to see the different ways in which we can tackle a problem. And I think Sheikha Intisar was very clear about the communication and the experience that everybody shares in building a dialogue. There's no right answer to this. So it's very important that we bring people with the expertise and the experience, frankly, to exchange with others. We're very proud here at the embassy here in Kuwait to partner with the Kuwait Society for Human Rights to look at gender equality issues. We've partnered with other notable and impressive NGOs here in Kuwait, including Abolish 153, who have been active in addressing violence against women. We've arranged for countless cultural programs, including one from former NASA engineer and entrepreneur Aisha Bowie, to speak over, about empowering girls and women in science and technology. It's not just one thing to sort of give them the dreams and the hopes. You really got to show them and talk to them specifically how it can be accomplished and how to go about doing it. We've also partnered with Amadis on women's career development programs here in Kuwait, and to provide women the sort of professional training and the career advancement strategies when it comes to, how do you shape your career going forward. We also brought a George Washington University professor to Kuwait to give seminars and workshops to support women in social entrepreneurship initiatives. Nothing like starting up your own business to show how empowered you are and how successful you can be. So we did that. We've also, very importantly, provided media and political campaign training for female leaders aspiring to hold representative positions in Kuwait, including as they navigate their elections and find how they can be much more convincing to their constituents, so they can be elected in the democracy here. But also we do this around the world as just part of our commitment to women's empowerment and also to building strong democracies. And last year, what I think was really important, and we're really looking forward to doing more work together, and especially with my other colleagues in the diplomatic community, Kuwait opened a domestic violence victim shelter. And we're looking forward to supporting this again through training and knowledge sharing and bringing experts. So really, these are just a few examples of how important women's issues are to the embassy and to the US government. We're very committed to it. And I just, as a matter of course, even in the United States, we've had our own long struggle. But I do want to point out to those who are sort of keeping book, as we say, that in this region and even within the U.S. Embassy, I'm pleased to highlight that we have an increasing number of women in leadership roles. So specifically in this region, we have 3 female ambassadors in Lebanon, Oman, and here in Kuwait. We have 3 chargés d'affaires, one in Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. So, we're fast growing into those leadership roles. It takes a lot of training and a lot of experience, but it's not hard to get there over your career. And finally, I also want to highlight specifically at the embassy here, we have at least 6 female section managers. So they are managing a lot of the work that we do here. I do want to highlight a couple of also programs that we do across the globe. We launched in 2019 the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. And this was really the first whole of government effort to advance global women's economic empowerment. It aims to reach 50 million women in the developing world by 2025. Through government activities, private-public partnerships, and a new innovative Women's Global Development Fund. So we do have funds, we commit that, and there's nothing better than making sure that 50% of your population at the very least is employed. Very important. In the first year that we launched this fund, we reached 20 million people worldwide. And then finally, tomorrow, I hope everybody tunes in to at least our website, but we have the 15th International Women of Courage Award, and I'm particularly proud of this because I was part of the team that launched it in 2007. But it's an award that recognizes women from around the globe who have demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership and advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equality, and women's empowerment, and often at great personal risk and sacrifice. So when the Secretary of State announced that we will post their really compelling stories, and some of them actually just bring you to tears in terms of the sacrifices they've made in order to make those advances in their own countries. Since we launched this award in 2007, we've recognized more than 155 awardees from over 75 countries. So really, really proud of it. And, we look very, very closely at how we can highlight those women who have taken enormous risks, both personal ones and for their families as they advance women's empowerment, especially in conflict areas. Many of you know we have the Women's Peace and Security Initiative, and it was recognizing when it was launched that women play a huge role, I think, as Sheikha Intisar has alluded, in resolving conflict. They have a role in their community, they have a role in their families, and they have a role in their political structure in helping wars and conflicts come to resolution. So that's a very strong commitment that our government makes. So that was just a very quick rundown of how committed we are. And definitely here in Kuwait, we are looking for lots of opportunities to be able to support women's empowerment and girls' empowerment, frankly, in Kuwait. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Elanud to continue our panelists and our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Romanowski. That was a really interesting overview of how the United States continues to engage with women's programs across the region and specifically in Kuwait. And I'm happy to hear that you're leading by example by empowering more women in leadership roles within your own embassies. And I'm a participant of an IVLP on women justice and the law, and I'm grateful for a very engaging program. I'm also a participant in the Personnalité d'Avenir program. And on that note, I'd like to cede the floor to Her Excellency Anne-Claire Legendre, the Ambassador of France in Kuwait, who was appointed Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the French Republic to the State of Kuwait just last year at the height of the COVID epidemic. And she previously served as Consul General of France in New York City. And she also served at the French Embassy in Yemen before joining in 2007 the Directorate of French Abroad of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where she contributed to the developing the consular cooperation between member states of the EU. From 2008 to 2010, she was in charge of bilateral relations with Algeria within the North Africa and Middle East Directorate. Her appointment to the permanent mission of France to the United Nations took her to New York from 2010 to 2013. While the Arab Spring placed the Middle East at the heart of the news, she negotiated the Syria, Lebanon, Israel-Palestinian issues, and Iraq at the United Nations Security Council. Called in 2013 to the cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development, Mr. Laurent Fabius, she served for 3 years as the minister's North Africa and Middle East advisor. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elanud. And indeed, we were very, very proud to have you in our program, Personnalité d'Avenir, and I hope you'll come back to France soon, whenever we can. But let me first thank Sheikha Intisar and the Intisar Foundation for this very important meeting. Indeed, this is a celebration of the International Day for Women's Rights issue, but as Alina, Her Excellency Romanowski said, it's more than this. It's an absolute priority for all of us, and I'm so happy to see so many countries and organizations committed to the advancement of women, to the equality between men and women in the world. as Sheikha Intisar pointed out very clearly, it's a priority. It's of course a moral priority to make women and men equal, but as she pointed out, it really plays a role in advancing peace, but also in advancing very important challenges, just like climate transition, development issues, etc. And I hope our colleague, Mr. Omar Odey and Mr. Tarek Al-Sher will also point out at the findings of the UN system about the role and the importance of empowering women to development, of course, in the Arab world, but more broadly in the world. So if we look at the figure, of course, we are moving forward, but the progress is still very slow around the planet. I think it's the World Economic Forum that made the studies and saying that we will reach equality between men and women in 150 years, which is of course completely unacceptable. And it's completely unacceptable for moral issues and all these issues I mentioned, but we see that when we get more diversity, more equality, we actually produce better societies, even better companies. If you look at the performance of companies that have actually included more diversity in the workplace. We have today one more reason to be worried on the women's rights issue with COVID. And we saw that unfortunately the pandemic actually really, make girls and women pay a higher price than anybody else around the world for many reasons, but mostly because 67% of healthcare workers are women, and a lot of frontliners in services, hospitality, tourism actually are women. And so they're actually better brands of the disease itself, but they also pay the highest impacts of the socioeconomic pressure that is bearing on them, but also of the domestic violence that we have seen increasing in all around the world, and the stats are really available. So on France side, we really believe this is an absolute priority. And actually, Emmanuel Macron has made of gender equality the one priority of his mandate, both internally and externally. And I think we see throughout our history, our own history of the struggle for women's rights in France, that political will really make the difference. And of course, we were really glad to see that Kuwait was taking the lead in the Gulf with the right to vote, the right to be elected for women in 2005, even though this year, unfortunately, no women were elected at the parliament. And we're also very happy to see that the domestic violence, which is another critical issue, and Dr. El Anoud, you know that better than anyone, and thanks to your action and other members of the civil society, this subject was put on the table, and the parliament, the Kuwaiti parliament last year passed a really important law to fight against domestic violence. So if I go back to the French situation and where I see the real key elements to move and empower women and really change what is a deeply entrenched culture of male domination of a woman that we have to change all over the world, not just in the West or or in the Arab world. It's empowering, as the title of this meeting says, empowering women in all fields, and that actually requires a lot of willingness and political will and determination. And in France, for instance, we didn't manage to change the position in higher administration or in companies without imposing quotas on decision-making position in companies, quotas in political parties. We impose political parties for them to present lists of candidates with women on there. And this is a logic that we are trying to apply to all sectors of the society, because it's so difficult when a culture is so entrenched to just wait for it to change. And actually, if you draw international comparison, you see that the political will put by the government really make a difference. So that's the first thing, try to empower women in all fields of society where their voice can be heard and listened to. The second point is, of course, those voices cannot be listened to and heard when they are threatened. So security, fighting against violence is an absolute priority for us. And in France, we passed recently, because this subject was really going under the radar, women being killed by their husbands, their partner, their family, and we realized also that it was even a question of vocabulary. Newspapers in France would deal about a crime, a woman killed by his husband has a passion affair. No, it's not a passion affair. It's a woman being killed by his husband, her husband. So we created, we used this word feminicide, which has been used by organizations around the world to define very specifically this crime, because this is a specific crime that society needs to address and really look in the eye. The last point is, of course, when you look at a society and such an entrenched culture, education is key. And education for both women and boys. I was wondering, in the title of the meeting of today, there's woman self-empowerment. So of course, the self-censorship that some women are also, imposing on themselves stops them on the road to empowerment. And so we need to teach young women that yes, they can. And as Alina said, role models are playing a very important part in this, and we need to convey this message at very high level for them to listen, and this is actually conveyed by the whole society, from toys to movies on TV. And the other side is also true. We need to teach and educate boys for them to be able to operate in an equal society. And this provides also new opportunities for men. And in France, we passed a new law, a paternity leave for men, for them to be able to take care of their children. And fathers are actually very happy about it, because finally they have time to spend quality time to spend with their kids. So this priority, as you see, has here really been important in the French internal policies, but it's also a priority for us at international level. And for the very first time in history, we have a president, Emmanuel Macron, who is a declared feminist and who has actually defined a feminist diplomacy. This is the official term, and I'm very happy, being a feminist myself, to carry the torch of a feminist diplomacy. And this means that throughout our humanitarian and development programs, we have completely redefined our way of thinking things. And we say, we need to make sure that 50% of all the international aid given by France goes to women, or goes to any program that, help the development of women who are bearing the fruit of climate change, violence against women, etc. So all the programs need to actually include this priority in the way they are thought through and elaborated. Of course, as mentioned by the US ambassador, we realize how this issue was also important when dealing with peace and security issues. And we are great supporters of the Women, Peace and Security agenda at the UN, that is carried with great determination by the UN Secretary General, but also is now a subject that has been discussed at the UN Security Council, because we see that women are the first victims. And I'm a great admirer of the work done by the Intisar Foundation, because they are indeed going on the ground and meeting the victims and trying to provide for their needs, following all the abuses that they have borne during the conflicts. So women are the first victims, and they shouldn't be also forgotten in the peace processes. And imagine, for instance, in Afghanistan, how important it is for women to be seated at the table. Otherwise, we all too much know that their voices will be forgotten in the peace that is being built, in the rebuilding of the infrastructure, the institution, and the state. And I have a particular point on survivors, and Sheikha Intisar shows and really shows the example in supporting this violence. But I want to point out that very important organization, to our point of view, it's the International Fund for Victims of Sexual Violence in Conflicts. And it is important because it has been also created by, an Iraqi woman, Nadia Mourad, who was a Nobel Prize recipient with Dr. Denis Mukwege. And France has been very supportive of this kind of issue because, as Sheikha Intisar mentioned, mental health, the result of trauma for these women were completely forgotten by the international community for a long time. And now, finally, we see an action emerge in this regard. So, of course, we are following this priority here in Kuwait. We are supporting the civil society in the work they are doing, the amazing work that you, Dr. El Anoud, are doing with Abolish 153, but other organizations, the Women's Society, and the human rights organization to enhance the women's right here in Kuwait, to give more voice to the women, to help them, being empowered in different fields of the society. But we also discuss this, of course, with the authorities. And I found a very interesting conversation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Human Rights Department, and also with the members of Parliament in how can we empower women here in Kuwait? How can we foster their voice on the political scene? How can we work further on domestic violence? Supporting this project for a shelter for domestic violence victims, or supporting with expertise and exchange of best practices with all the work that has been done in our different society that clearly can, build a better world by just exchanging ideas and good practices on this regard. So in conclusion, I just want to point out the very important event that is coming in France in the next few months. We are chairing with Mexico the UN summit that will be organized this year, which is called the Forum Génération Égalité, so Equality Generation Forum. And this is a very important moment because it's 25 years after this UN summit in Beijing that actually allowed for the first real declaration of women's rights to be issued and adopted by the international community. We are now back, and we need to gather in Paris in summer to discuss again this issue and to see how we can move forward from the declaration we adopted 25 years ago to a better world, whether in the Arab world or in the Western world or everywhere, and move forward on the progress, to not wait 150 years for equality to finally happen and become a reality in the world. So of course I'm really looking forward to work with all the Kuwaiti civil society and the authorities in this prospect. This is a very important moment. And we really want to have Kuwait participating in this effort, which I hope will really, make the difference for the young girls and the young women that we have in the room and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And we really appreciate this idea of feminist diplomacy, whether it's in France's foreign policies or in your domestic affairs. And I really appreciate the point you made about needing to include male allies. And speaking of male allies, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Tariq al-Sheikh, the United Nations resident coordinator to the state of Kuwait, who has more than 26 years of experience in policies and strategies of urban development, formulation, training, advisory services, and project implementation. He was the former director of Future Saudi Cities program for 2 years, from 2014 to 2017, and the acting regional director for Arab states of UN Habitat, and the director of the sub-regional office for Gulf states of UN Habitat in Kuwait, as well as the housing sector lead in the UN country team of Iraq. And before that, he worked as assistant professor at the Urban Training Studies Institute in Cairo, and he was the coordinator of the Cabinet Committee for Urban Markets in Egypt. Dr. Tariq, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Anoud, and thank you, Sheikh Intisar, for the invitation and for convening this important event. Also, thank you for having me in this panel with Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States, and also the Ambassador of France, hearing from them about their experiences and about also the efforts that both countries are doing worldwide and also in Kuwait. And for that also, I would like to stress that within the United Nations and our team in Kuwait and also globally, particularly we are aligning most of our work towards the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which is focusing on the women in public life, equal participation in decision making. And we have been actively engaging into the Generation Equality campaign. Because we believe that women and women contribution, and particularly during COVID, has increased, while the impact on women globally and regionally and locally have also increased, putting them in very stressful conditions. We see actually that women rights to decision making in all areas of life, equal pay, equal sharing of unpaid care and domestic work, and also we see that those issues are really requires attention, in addition to ending all forms of violence against women and girls, and healthcare services that have risen during this period of the pandemic. Just to give you some small, very quick statistics, is that nearly 60% of women around the world work in the informal economy, earning less, saving less, and at greater risk of falling into poverty. Women earn 23% less than men globally. Women occupy only 24% of parliamentary seats worldwide. And unfortunately, here we saw in Kuwait, the only woman lost her seat during the last elections. 1 in 3 have experienced physical or sexual violence over this period. And this is really is alarming. The COVID-19 pandemic has erased decades of progress towards gender equality. From high job losses to exploding burdens of unpaid care, from disrupted schooling to an escalating crisis of domestic violence and exploitation of women's lives. This have been unpended, and their rights have eroded actually in many places of the world. Mothers, especially single mothers, have faced acute anxiety and adversity, and the consequences will far outlast the pandemic. But women have also been on the front lines, as Ambassador Ankler mentioned, and they have been in the front line of responding to COVID, has been supporting their kids in school while also working. And I can also, during this forum, commend my colleagues, and particularly my single female-headed households of my colleagues, who have been working and contributing to the UN work during COVID, despite everything, despite schooling, while also taking care of their children. So chapeau to all of them. They are among leaders who have kept prevalence rates lower, and also countries on track of recovery. This year, on the International Women's Day, we are celebrating women leadership in all its forms. And we have a series of events that we are organizing here in Kuwait, but also regionally and worldwide. Tomorrow, we have UN Women and UNDP in collaboration with the Women Research or Research Center in the University of Kuwait, organizing the Ring the Bell, which is the global event of celebrating Women's Day in the Kuwait boards, marking a number of key business leaders of Kuwait and supporting their leadership and highlighting their efforts. And also another with in collaboration with the French Embassy and the Mexican Embassy in celebration and in preparation for the Generation Equality Forum Summit that is going to happen during this year, tomorrow, with the Women's Society. So what I'm trying to say is that women issues and gender issues and gender equality are at the center of our work, at the center of our priorities in Kuwait, in the region, and worldwide. I would like to bring to the attention one of the early parliamentarians who have actually inspired women issues, and this is Shirley Chisholm, the first Black US congressman, which once said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And I believe that this is what really should be doing, and this is what you mentioned, Sheikh Intisar, and this title, self-empowerment. The future is better with women at every table, and this is what I believe so. Where decisions are being made, women should be there. Women should be taking decision when we are talking about peace, when we are talking about forging prosperity, when we are talking about sustainable development, because women has been at the center of all our efforts and all our work. They are affecting and they are being affected as well. I wish to highlight that we had many women leaders across history who opened the doors for more women equality. Yet still, it is a long way. I recall Jessie Astrate, which is from Australia, the first woman to participate in the United Nations Establishment Conference in 1945. And she was behind the formulation of Article 8 of the United Nations Charter that gave women equal access to United Nations jobs. We are actually seeing it ourselves now at the United Nations, where we are proud in the United Nations that across the leadership of different principles in the United Nations, we reached parity, 50% women, 50% men. Also, at the resident coordinators level, at country level, out of 130, we have almost reached parity between 50% men and 50% women. Also, I would like proudly to say that in my office, the resident coordinator office to the state of Kuwait, the team of the resident coordinator office are 60% women, 40% men. This is actually in a transparent, competitive process. We see that women are more able and competent to lead, and to lead with care and with dedication and with commitment. I also would like to recall, because it's very important that we learn from the history and we see what happened in the future, in this present, and to look and plan for our future. In Kuwait, Mariam Saleh established in 1937 the first school for girls' education. And we remember the first seminar in Kuwait calling for women's rights was held in November 1953. Across all sectors, communities, and societies, women have key contributions to make to leadership. From politics and cooperation to sports and STEM, we are working and discussing with different organizations here in Kuwait and also outside Kuwait as the UN regional and UN global to ensure that women active participation in STEM. Sports are a very, very important tool in order to ensure that women active participation, particularly in areas of sports that are not common for women, and they are very actively engaged and can do better. I think this year, while we are working together and thinking more of how women can take a leading role, we need to see that there is importance for bigger investment in social protection and also in roads against poverty. When women are in parliament, countries adopt more stringent climate change policies. When women are at peace table, agreements are more enduring. And with women now serving in equal numbers at the top leadership posts at the United Nations, we are seeing even more concerted action to secure peace, sustainable development, and human rights. In a male-dominated society, being a male also, I can admit that, world with a male-dominated culture, gender equality is essentially a question of power. It is very important that we see males are an essential part of the solution. And as the solution is that we need to change the mindsets at different levels, starting from schooling, from education, the evolving conservatives and violence against women and wars and violence that we see across the region stems from education. Forms of education and culture and training in a way to ensure equality and to ensure that acceptance of differences, acceptance of each one's ideas and value that is so important to ensure a prosperous and peaceful future. The governments and companies and institutions will have to adopt special measures and to advance women's equal participation and achieve rapid change. The UN is ready in collaboration with international partners, advocates, as well as local partners to call for more advocacy and nudging for behavioral change at schools, at universities, within districts and communities to change stereotypes and attitudes. The United Nations has several success practices and experiences in South-South cooperation, working with community leaders, parliamentarians, and their committees to advance gender equality. And women expanded leadership roles. Strengthening women strategies and policies are embedded in countries' commitments to Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. As we recover from the pandemic, I believe that support and stimulus packages must target also women and girls specifically, including through investments in women-owned businesses and the care economy. Pandemic recovery is our chance to leaving behind generations of exclusion and inequalities to more inclusion and equalities. Whether running a government entity or a business or a popular movement, women are making contributions that are delivering for all and driving progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. My office is not an exception. The United Nations is not an exception. Our women leaders, our colleagues and partners are doing excellent job working together with our communities, with our societies to make it a better world. We are ready in the United Nations to collaborate with our partners, with member states to ensure generation equality is not only a title of a summit, but it is a reality on the ground. In order to make a change, we need to work in communities, work with schools. It is starting from our kid, a son, a husband, also a brother, is very important to ensure change happens. And hope that we have a successful event. And thank you so much for the Intisar Foundation for convening this important event.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And we certainly look forward to more engagement of the UN and more leadership roles for women at the UN, especially at the very top. And I would like to now ask our second male participant, Mr. Omar Ouda, the head of regional delegation for the GCC countries at the International Committee of the Red Cross, to take the floor and contribute to our discussion. Omar has been working for over 15 years in the humanitarian sector. He joined the ICRC focusing on prison monitoring as detention delegate in prisons in Tunisia, Algeria, Mauritania, and Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. This included thematic research on prison overcrowding. He was head of ICRC office in Kirkuk, Iraq, overseeing their response to the lingering conflict in the Iraqi disputed territories. He held different positions in ICRC Yemen, Somalia, Kenya. Mr. Omar Ouda has worked at ICRC headquarters as an advisory, and he was a senior advisor at the ICRC Humanitarian Negotiation Exchange Platform. He was also a strategic advisor at the Health Unit in Geneva, and before joining the ICRC, Omar worked for the French NGO Médecins Sans Frontières on medical relief projects in Chad and South Sudan. The floor is yours, Mr. Ouda.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lanoud. Thank you first and foremost to Sheikh Intisar as well and the Intisar Foundation for convening this event. It's a real honor to be able to contribute and to discuss this topic, and I'm very grateful to the fellow panelists as well for their insights. Ambassador Romanowski's endorsement notwithstanding, I do feel a little underqualified for next to her and Ambassador Legendre and Sheikh Intisar and Dr. Lanoud. Nonetheless, I will try to share some of my my own experiences, and I'll really just try to give an overview of the ways that ICRC tries to tackle the specific issue of women in war. It's the heading that we give it. So, as you may know, International Committee of the Red Cross works primarily in settings of armed conflict or internal disturbance, and having been in some of the ones you just heard, there's a few moments that come to mind when I think of this topic. things that were illustrative maybe of the real multifaceted experience of women in armed conflict, the density and the detail of it. One that took place was in Yemen. This was in 2011, so this was before the current campaign by the Arab Coalition. It was the time of protests in Sana'a, and with the protest movement, there started to be a situation of escalating urban fighting in Sana'a itself, in the city, between government forces and different tribal militias. So services had shut down, and electricity and water and so on. It became very difficult to move around the city. And on the street one day there was water trucking that started to happen. These trucks that look like small gas trucks, if you see what I mean. They're carrying water. They go from house to house, filling the reservoirs or containers. And there was one making its way slowly through the neighborhood with older, cobbled together the way much was at that time in a war setting. This tends to happen, and this one was leaking, not a lot, but where the provision hose would join the reservoir, there was a trickle of water that was coming down. So I was watching it make its way from one house to the next, and I could see there was a woman, a very old woman, barefoot, clothes and rags, clearly destitute, who was crouching at one of the wheels and collecting this trickle of water in a jerry can, these 20-liter sort of plastic containers that people would use for their personal use. And it was just a trickle, drops really, that would come as the water was flowing, and she'd collect them in this jerry can, trying to make up the 20 liters. The truck would move on to the next house. She'd be slower and kind of gather herself and get there in time and start collecting drops again. And this was how she was gonna collect 20 liters of water. It was barely a quarter full at the time I saw her as she kept moving around. This is in the middle of the capital. This is in a main neighborhood in Sana'a, and it's just the example kind of crystallized for me in some ways what the circumstance of women in war can be. There's patience, determination, humility, so also courage, but also a real hardship there, all of which are dimensions that we see in a lot of our field activities when it comes to this. When I tried to think about it, as humanitarians, we have this language of humanitarian needs, and when we're in the field or when we're just thinking about an issue, we try to think, okay, what's the humanitarian need? How are we able to address it? And I share that just because in that case at the time, it's true that it felt like, okay, well, water clearly is, and water supply maybe is a need, but in the context of today's discussion and in the subject we're talking about, I don't necessarily think the humanitarian need here was primarily water. At the very least, it wasn't only water. And in some ways, that was only just the most visible, easiest thing to address in terms of women in war. The need was really everything that came before that moment that I described, and everything around it. The existing inequalities that get exacerbated by armed conflict and really stretched to their limit, the squeezing out of any means for livelihood, even just a basic means. It was just a very strong example of those consequences, and really the system-wide sort of underlying circumstances that led to that. Much more than just a stoppage of water supply. Again, the specific inequalities, the vulnerabilities, the heavy burden that women carry in armed conflict, and that trying to address that invisible part is really what action for women in war calls for, at least from our perspective. So I wanted to share that as a way to, I was trying to identify or really try to sharpen what is this issue that we talk about at ICRC when we say women in war. How we're trying to tackle that is there's maybe three parts to it. The first is to really take an approach where, because it's so systemic and so cross-cutting, the example like the one I described is to take an approach that really tries to integrate this perspective into all existing work. In other words, it's not that there's some separate initiative that will address this problem dedicated but in an isolated way. No, it's more to bring the perspective, find that perspective in every single activity. One example is in Iraq and Syria, where we do microeconomic initiatives. This is ways to help people start small projects so that they can restart a means for income. And in Iraq, when I was there in 2009 and 10, there was a need to really target in a specific way female-headed households, widows or single mothers that had families to care for. And this was done in Syria now in the most recent version of this program. 9,000 women have been helped through similar initiatives. In support to primary healthcare centers, which we do a lot of in the region, and which is one of the first front lines for healthcare during armed conflict, also to privilege maternal and child health and the vulnerabilities that come up with that. So to really look, not to launch some distinct initiative, but to maintain a priority by integrating it into really every type of activity that we do is maybe the first part. The second thing at ICRC is our own gender diversity, and to try to really have gender parity for our staff, so that we're aiming for parity between men and women in management positions. We're aiming for the most balanced field teams that we can have. We're admittedly a bit late to this. The first female delegate was hired at ICRC in 1961, but today around 40% of the staff are women, and that's growing. And our own delegation here in Kuwait that covers the Gulf Cooperation Council countries is no exception to that. I would say that for this second part about gender diversity, we do really try to have a conscious understanding that it's not a goal simply about meeting a quantitative target or just having balance as a just so you can measure it and be balanced. There really is a feeling that gender diversity in the teams enables more effective, impactful humanitarian response. By definition, you're going to be more attuned to the full set of things, again, that would be present in an example like the one I started with the woman collecting water, as opposed to something that maybe you might take a shortcut or be too narrow in the way you think of it. The last part about our approach is maybe that we try very hard to cultivate the right mindset, the one that can frame the discussion correctly. And that links with a series of discussions and considerations about how we communicate about women in war, the depictions that get chosen, the range of experiences that get discussed and focused on. And to try to really proactively undo, if you will, the way that problems or, again, humanitarian needs might be conventionally understood, so that we can have the broadest and most inclusive and way. Yemen, which I was describing at the beginning in that moment in 2011, included as well a very prominent role in the protests for women. And you may remember the Nobel Prize that year was shared, but one of the recipients was Tawakkul Karman, who was the Yemeni activist who led a lot of that component. By way of conclusion, I wanted to maybe say all of this is a process. Those three parts I mentioned of the approach we try to bring, the mainstreaming of this issue in all of our activities across the board, the gender diversity internally and in our teams, and this adjustment in mindset and perspective. Those aren't measures to simply kind of execute and be finished with. Those are really three ongoing elements that you juggle and keep using and tinkering with and working with. It's why I can only join Ambassador Romanowski in saying there's still much more to do. That's what can sometimes be difficult, and that I think that the issue and the importance of it can feel obvious, but how much there is still to tackle is big. That's a feeling that's familiar, to be honest, in humanitarian work, unfortunately. It's a sense of sort of big, overwhelming needs that outstrip the efforts that any one actor or organization can bring. It's why today in this region and beyond, the International Committee of the Red Cross really feels a need for collectivity. Creating a shared understanding, a truly collaborative approach to issues like this one that are only going to be solved through that complementarity and synergies. For the ICRC, the Kuwait Red Crescent, the government of Kuwait, the Intisar Foundation, the United Nations, the various diplomatic colleagues, these are all examples of credible, committed partners that really make up the full package, I would say, to address the issue that we're talking about today. I really want to thank, therefore, Sheikha Intisar for the event, for her call for destigmatization, which is an ambitious and really necessary goal. The exchange we're having, our presence here, is really all an example of that kind of cooperative spirit that we need going forward. So thank you very much, and I'll look forward to occasions to do more of this in the future.
Thank you so much for sharing the trifold approach at the ICRC with us today. And I would like to exercise my privilege as a moderator to ask the first question in our Q&A session. And I'd like to ask Sheikh Intisar about how COVID-19 has disrupted some of the work that you were doing in the foundation, because we have heard from the ambassadors and from the UN representative how the impact of COVID was really felt in the work that they were doing. So I'd like to hear from you what the impact of this epidemic has been on the work you are doing and attempting to do in Lebanon and the Arab world.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for an amazing dialogue. I love this. It's nice to get different points of view, and it just gets my mind going on what more can be done. So very grateful for everyone's participation. COVID-19 had brought with it all its difficulties, challenges, violence, fear. We've gone through it. Imagine people who are living in one family in one room, or in a very tough neighborhood, or just being in confined spaces, very small confined spaces, is very difficult for our women. And the amazing team have been supporting the women from the beginning of the second week. So the first week, everyone was in shock. Beginning of the second week, we realized, oh my God, our women need us more than we even think they do. And so we started working with them, communicating with them, and we started online training with them. And this was something we've been thinking of, and for sure, like everyone else, postponing and postponing. And then the COVID and the lockdown happened, and we had to put on different hats. And because of the challenge of COVID, we got to see inside their houses. We got to train them in their little confined spaces. So we had different women Some of the women couldn't speak, so they were just blinking yes or no with their eyes. But the most important thing that happened with the confinement or the lockdown was we started an online training. And the online training, we realized, why stay only with our women when we can open it to a bigger number of females or males around the world? And so we started on Instagram. We offer free training based on drama therapy. So it's everything from mindfulness to exercise in drama therapy, things that can be done safely at home. And for sure safely, because our advisory board have made sure that they're safe to do, and they will not open a lot of wounds that cannot be closed after that. But they are, because they're small exercises, with time, women can definitely gain a big benefit from it. And we're also working with on another form of platform where we can support people more one-on-one. So we have, and we're also working remotely, which is the other thing that's very interesting. So we're working from Lebanon into Jordan, and from Lebanon also remotely, because of the lockdown, remotely with our recipients either in Tripoli or in Sabra and Shatila. So it's been very interesting to be able to work virtually. We actually had we as the executive board have had our first virtual training just last week. And believe me, it would have been much nicer had it been all of us in one room, but it was still good. And so it's very interesting how this virtual world is growing. And every time we think we're going to go back to one-on-one, we realize now it's going to be longer and longer. So we are learning more and more how to deal with people emotionally using drama therapy virtually and even online. So it's a very interesting thing that we were pushed to do, and I'm so grateful we were pushed to do.
Well, as you have said yourself, this is a time for creative solutions. And I guess one of the odd blessings of this epidemic is that it has forced everybody to think on their feet and find virtual solutions that may sometimes be more inclusive because of their very nature.
Exactly. If I might just add one thing, is when we measure the impact of the virtual on the women, keep in mind these women have done non-virtual and virtual, or let's say face-to-face and virtual. They thought it was 60% as effective. So that's a good number. I didn't even think it would be half as good, but they gave it more than 50. They said 60% as effective. Yes, they preferred one-on-one, but virtual worked. And with the group that never did any one-on-one, so they're a new group, they're sort of virgins to any kind of drama therapy. They loved it and they're engaged with it. So this has been very good exercise for us to be forced to do. And I'm glad we're forced to do it because it can be done. Even mental well-being can be done virtually, which is against everything that I've ever read.
Well, that's reassuring, not just for your program, but for all our programs that are being conducted online at the moment. I'd like to ask our ambassadors a question that I'm sure I'd asked them before in a private conversation, but especially given the importance of the initiatives that you both have headed and the kind of hard politics that you've been involved in. And at this moment of time, both of you have presidents that have very publicly stood for women's issues and specifically domestic violence. So my question to both of you, Your Excellencies, is how much has being a woman under these particular circumstances that we're living in added a sense of urgency to your motivation to find self-empowerment avenues for women?
Okay. I don't know, Alina, do you want to
Go ahead, go right ahead.
Thank you for this question, Dr. Alanoud. I think the first thing is that it feels, it gives a particular responsibility because it's, I feel I have been lucky throughout my career. I've been able to express, my talents to accomplish whatever I wanted to accomplish. And I've been the first in many of the position, but I think the most important is not to be the first, is to be sure that you won't be the last. And so to open, a way for the younger generation, other women to actually go through the same door and accomplish themselves. So, both in the diplomatic corps, I felt a particular responsibility, but then of course, it feels, it's a great source of pride for me that France is so, committed to gender equality, and to have a president that tells from the very first day of his mandate that this will be the one priority of the country is very encouraging. Because as I was saying before, without this political will, how can we change something that is so entrenched into our culture? And then, going through my diplomatic life, I think I was questioned. Of course, some people say, a woman in the Arab world or in societies where women are not so present and visible in the public sphere, is it very relevant? Are you the right person for the job? And I think, as the Dr. Omar Ode pointed out, I think it gives us also a different understanding of the society. And for a very long time, I think, diplomacy has been focusing on the male part of the world, and actually society, made 50% of both sides. So if you understand only one part of it, you miss a large point of what you want to achieve. So, to me, it felt that I was actually more relevant to my country and to the objectives we were pursuing because I was a woman. And I think, throughout my career, I managed to make the point that this was the right way to do it. So I'm very proud and I'm very committed, and I'm really looking forward to. I just arrived, so I don't have the long experience of some others around the table in working with the Kuwaiti authorities, the Kuwaiti civil society. But I think Kuwait has this taken this pioneering role in the Gulf region, and I really look forward to working with all of you to advance this and work together in the collaborative way that Omar Ode has put forward as the only way to move forward on gender issue.
Thank you very much for that, Your Excellency. Do you have something you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, I was just going to echo a lot of what Ancla said about experiences in our professional advancement as women in the Middle East, and I'll get back to that in a minute or so. But I do think that being a woman during COVID, I will say, is I think what's been very clear in how we've looked at the impact of COVID on families and on people's professions is we can be much more in some ways in touch with especially families where the kids are, let's be honest, kids are now staying and studying at home. And that is a nightmare for a lot of, it's wonderful to have the kids at home, but honestly, making sure that, they are engaged and that they're studying and that they have time to rest. And there's a lot, and if you happen to have, as we have, many women who are working at the embassy, that's a huge tug of war that they are facing. And so being more sensitive to the flexibility of things like telework and spreading your, adjusting your time and using the technology. We've really, I think being a woman, and particularly who has experienced a lot of the same issues throughout their career, I think you come to it with a little bit more patience and creativity to how you can. It's about getting your work done. It's not about where you get your work done. It's really that you can do it. I also think one of the things that's been challenging, while I share Intisar's enthusiasm about how much we can get done on a Zoom call, which, let's face it, we're having a great conversation here, but it also has limited your access to your mentors in watching them actually work instead of just on a screen, and engaging with your fellow professionals, which oftentimes young women, when they're starting in their careers, they don't have that baseline. I'll presume that Anne-Claire has had a long career of mentoring. I'm sure she has, but you have to do it face to face. And so much of picking your mentor, whether it's a woman or whether it's a man, and you ought to have both, you got to watch them in action. And sometimes it's a little harder. But going back to I get a lot of questions from my female colleagues who are starting off working in the Middle East, asking, how tough was it, and how have you managed the cultural issues? And I give them kind of two or three pieces of advice. One, you're going to work in that culture, and you have to find a way. So much of it is based on your own personality, but on your ability to deliver solid, good work in response to the issues that you're tackling together. And then at the end of the day, I remember saying, don't think you don't have an advantage over some of your male colleagues. And I started my career in what we call the hard power side of all of this national security issues. And the thing, maybe I wasn't a fighter pilot and I couldn't talk with, all these guys about flying around in the air. But the one thing I did get access to was in being invited to their families. I could go to dinner. I could talk to their daughters. I could be introduced to their wives, and a whole different world and a whole different understanding of the culture opened up because I could go there and not my male colleagues. And I kept remembering, there's always an opportunity. Take those opportunities and you'll find that I'm seeing Intisar smile here. You know what I'm talking about in Saudi Arabia, for example. So, you don't shut the door before the door is shut on you, frankly, and make sure it's open. So I've always encouraged women to work in the Middle East. It is a little bit different, but it's not impossible, and all sorts of really wonderful things can happen, and you can be just as successful as your male colleague. It's just a very different way of navigating the environment, but it's not right or wrong. It's just a different way, and you can be equally successful. So those are my thoughts.
I really like that you ended on that note, that even the definitions of success and the ways to navigate that success, they shouldn't be just defined by the traditional male role. So thank you very much for that. And speaking of the male role, we've received a question from Ben Volk asking about the role of men. So I'm gonna ask our two male panelists about that. And he asks, what are the effective ways for men in the Arab world to be stimulated to support female mental health and healing? And how can they be stimulated to open up to their own need of mental health and healing, especially during the time of COVID? So if Dr. Tariq would be so kind as to give me your answer to that. I think you're still muted, Dr. Tariq.
It's okay now. It's okay now.
Yeah, it's perfect now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Anoud. I believe in the male-dominated societies, and in particularly in this situation during COVID. There is lots that needs to be done by the males themselves, for themselves, and for the society, and the wider change of the context that we are living, for increasing women access to leadership, for they're actually more taking or lifting the burden from them. I believe during the COVID situation, what needs to be done, and based on the lessons that we have learned here, is that we cannot get out of this but together and working together. I mean, working together as societies and as different parts of the societies, men and women. In the male-dominated society, I will not like in the Middle East, there is a need for a change in mindsets and in change in the psychology of many men, looking at how they perceive the leadership of women in their positions. I have worked in many countries in this region, and I have seen different ways and of dealing with women in leadership positions, or even in collegial positions, or as staff and teams. And it varies between different cultures and different origins, different backgrounds, and different educations. And for this, it is very important that we cannot generalize. A person who has been brought up in an equal family with different exposures and different learning ways of respect of the others, irrespective of this other male or different genders or different orientations, it is something that you need to respect and to say that we are working in each other's, in a society where each one has his own freedom. His own freedom for belief, his own freedom for religion, his own freedom for understanding and responding to his or her needs. This requires also at certain moment of time mental training. People to be trained psychology, to understand a shift. Some countries has opened up, like Saudi Arabia, opened up fast. People has accepted or has actually agreed to what is there without their own will. There is many of those actually, and there's many of those in our societies that they see a special way of behaviors in their society, and they are actually silent about it, but within their minds they do not accept it. It is very important that we look into different instances and situations where we ensure that a balanced society originates from a balanced kid. A balanced kid that is has been raised in a good schooling and a good nurturing within a family that has a balanced understanding of how the woman and men has equal role in their societies. I believe a program like Barik and Boomerang are very important programs of changing the behaviors of people at certain moment for anti-bullying, for example, but this can be replicated and expanded to more of working on kids and children to be the agents of change in their families and for their fathers. Kids are champions of change. And if we work on that, we will not have those conservatives, we will not have violence, we will have more peaceful, more peace. People who are actually, who respect within the family, each one in the family and their role, and a father and a brother who actually can help and equally help and support his family in everything, that they do it equally, is something that can be stimulated with different approaches to changing behavior at schools, working with families in communities. And in that, it is very important to ensure a collective programs that use the different cultures of different countries to bring experiences and best practices. One lessons that I have learned in my work over the periods within the United Nations and before in this region is that you cannot instigate or stimulate change by bringing expertise from outside. Local hands and local capacities and local experiences are very important to localize experiences to the context and understanding of the different society. What can be accepted, for example, in Kuwait, maybe a little bit requires a little bit different in Erbil, from Nasiriyah, from Arar in Saudi Arabia, from Aswan in Egypt, from Khartoum. There is a different context and different localities and different approach that local communities and local leaders and non-profit organizations and community organizations and research institutions and the different institutions in the local communities that need to take a leading role in that.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I wanna give an opportunity to Mr. Audet to respond to the same question, but specifically in the issue of local expertise, I want to ask you about being also an Arab man in an international organization. And if we have enough time after you answer, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Plight who's been waiting patiently to ask a question. Go ahead, Mr. Umar.
No, thanks for that. I mean, in terms of local expertise and how to partner and work, we sort of have the view that there's a complementarity that you can find. As you might know, International Red Cross is part of this network of things we call the movement, which is this movement of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in each country. And depending on where you are, you really find that it's the local Red Cross or Red Crescent who really have, you know, a deep kind of detailed situational awareness, and who are able to therefore either have access or facilitate work or just carry out activities in a way that a larger, sometimes slower, bulkier organization can't. Then at the same time, there are things that an organization like ICRC can do, and areas of work in particular, including some areas like that can sometimes have a lot of sensitivity around them, whether it's sexual and gender-based violence or even maternal and child health, leaving aside just the means. So it's the complementarity between those two things that maybe can give the fullest kind of impact and response, and the awareness and knowledge sharing. I remember in Chad when I was there working in refugee camps, and you would hear female patients in the clinics just come in and say, everything hurts. I just have pain everywhere. Or some sort of generalized statement. And it was sort of only after time that it's our Chadian colleagues who explained, male nurses, a lot of the nurses tended to be male, that this actually is code, or the way you say that you've been a victim of sexual assault or otherwise. So again, it's the complementarity and the way to sort of, yeah, I guess strengthen each other's work that's maybe the real strength from local action and international organizations.
Well, thank you for that. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all for your transparent and generous sharing during this virtual event. And if you have any final words that you'd like to conclude with, I'd like to give you the floor, starting with you, Sheikh Intisar.
Habibti, thank you so much. I would just like to answer a question that was posted in the Q&A. And how do we destigmatize mental health? I cannot give a one answer fits all, but we found that by finding something engaging, creative, fun, the fun fact is what destigmatizes it. Our women would say, oh, we're going to go act and play. And so, yes, they're getting a lot of emotional support and they are changing, but they can also destigmatize it by not saying, we're not going to a psychiatrist. They're not going to a psychiatrist. They're going to have fun. So that's one way. There's lots of ways. I mean, I'm always asked, how can females become more self-empowered in the workplace? And I say, just share your shame stories, because what we consider very shameful, once we speak about it, we realize it really is not a big deal. And we can say that because of the reaction of the other people listening to it. So our shame stories are so big in our heads that once we share them, we realize we've been carrying an unnecessary burden. So it could be sharing of stories, it could be creative mental health programs. There's lots of ways to do it. It could be using the media to do it. There's like many ways to do it, but let's do one at a time or 10 at a time, but let's do something instead of sitting there and debating what we can do. As you said, and Mr. Auda, the more people that participate, the quicker the effect, the stronger the effect. So if every single one of us did one thing, this would be a much better world.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Intisar. Ambassador Romanowski, did you have any final words?
Well, my only final words is to say that we need to remain very committed to the empowerment of women and girls across our entire society and in very in important contexts. And the more we can work together and find partnerships to do it, the better we're going to be. I'm not one who's convinced that we're going to say that it's either in 10 years, 50 years, 125 years, 350 years. But I think I think it honestly is going to be a constant struggle that will go on long into past my lifetime. But if I can leave encouragement and I can leave some good practices and I can support what we're doing, it'll be really exciting. And to a question or a point that was made earlier, I mean, you just look at the composition of the new Biden administration's cabinet, and it's got some inclusive representatives of our own society and our own culture that has never been there before. And that's a step in the right direction. And to keep that alive and to keep that going and to see that and encourage that in other countries and other societies is really exciting to be part of. So we got to keep working on it, and there's a lot more to do, and we're all going to try to do it. So thanks very much for this program too.
Thank you for your words, and we are all working in our own way on incremental change, but hoping for exponential change that happens in the most surprising ways sometimes. Ambassador Legrand, do you have any final words?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Al-Anoud. Just to recall what Alina and Sheikh Intisar said, I just want to express my commitment, and I think that's what we've been telling today. And I think it feels good to feel that there is such a collective, determination to move forward. So I'd be a little bit more optimistic than Alina. I think what Dr. Aude said about kids are champions of change, I think this is a really important, point. And I think we can really make a difference by changing, education and trying to have an impact on the mindsets and the way people perceive themselves and perceive others in our society. So, I hope that the forum Generation Equality will be a real moment, a turning a key moment for this mindset to find ways and means to change around the world with the support of all the organization around the table, the civil societies and the good willing governments that wants to make the change.
Thank you so much. Goodwill, and as you said, real political will as well. Dr. Al-Sheikh, do you have final words you'd like to leave us with?
My final word would be that, and this is personal, I will continue actually supporting my young 15 years old daughter to be the leader in the family. I actually bring her up to be a leader and to decide on her own what she wants to be studying, what she wants to be doing. And one of the things is also, and as we are talking about stigmas, in our religion, they say that the male has twice the female. In my family, my daughter has equal shares as my son. And this will remain, and this will continue to be my practice. And I believe that if we work together on changing stigmas and changing issues that we believe it is a norm, but it is not a norm. It's something that has to be evolving from our society and the needs of society. One final things. Human capital and human development index in Kuwait and in the Arab world are losing a lot by not ensuring gender equality and harnessing the benefits of gender in work and in labor markets and in leaderships. So I believe with working towards that, economies can benefit a lot in this region by expanding more gender into different forms and different types of jobs and even in the society.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we will benefit a lot when we become much more gender inclusive than we are right now. The final word is with you, Mr. Arbit.
Thank you very much. Just first, thanks again to Sheikh Intisar, to the Intisar Foundation for this opportunity. I was very conscious, to be honest, coming in that my view is at best, my perspective on this topic is at best incomplete. But I do feel that it was completed and complemented and helped with the contribution of the panelists and the discussion overall. I enjoyed this very much, and I'm very grateful for the chance. So I have two little girls here who I will get to in a few minutes probably, and I'm a little bit more hopeful, let's say, for them thanks to this. So happy International Women's Day tomorrow.
Oh, thank you so much. What a great way to end. Happy International Women's Day to all of you and everybody who's listening in and participating. And thanks again to our hostess, Sheikh Intisar, for convening this really wonderful event. And I feel very privileged to have been part of this conversation. And thank you all again for your transparency and for everyone who listened in. And I apologize for everybody whose questions we couldn't take. Thank you.